So without further ado, I am so excited because there's not many people in this industry that really shakes me up and excites me about a particular topic. But we have a gentleman, Torin Ellis. Torin is not just a speaker, he's a catalyst for change. And I can tell you, being in this industry for a long time, this man has inspired so many of us, including myself, to rethink their approach to talent acquisition, addressing biases, also championing diversity, equity, inclusion in the workplace. So, without further delay, welcome Torin Ellis. Torin, thank you so much for doing this.
I appreciate you. I really, really do. This was a session in the making. So thank you, Serge.
Perfect. Well, Torin, I'm going to leave the stage to you and go ahead.
The wounds of honor are often self-inflicted. Honor is something that each of us is born with. Honor is something that cannot be given. It cannot be taken. It must only not be lost. So before I hop on this frequency, because I am going to give you a different beat around D&I, I just want to say thank you. Because for many of you, you could be doing something different wherever you are in the world, in the globe, but you chose to spend, 45 or 60 minutes, however long it is, with us. And I appreciate that. I also want to say to the individuals who might have a visual impairment, the mock neck is sky blue. The pant and bottom are sky blue. The fedora is tan with a red ribbon and a bit of denim and a feather. For those that have a audible disability, I hope that when we send this out, it may include some closed captions. As we stand here in Black History Month, my hope is that vocally we change a little bit of history, that we shift our relationship with power. I want to also say good morning to Beverly. I know a lot of people got up early, but Beverly sent me a message and said it's 7 a.m. where she is. And she said that she wouldn't be pretty, but she would be present. And so to you, Beverly, I say thank you. And to each and every one of you, I appreciate the time. Serge, we did it. We planned for well over a year to have this conversation. And again, I want to thank you and the entire CareerBeacon team for what you all have done behind the scenes to bring this conversation to fruition. No need for you to take notes. I'm not going to have any slides. It's really about you focusing and being present with my voice. I want you to follow me on this journey. Like, I want to take you on a vocal journey that is beautiful and an aspirational in that it shifts, as I said before, your relationship with power. The wounds of honor are often self-inflicted. Honor is something that each of us is born with. Honor is something that cannot be given. It cannot be taken. It must only not be lost. So story has it that this young man decided that he wanted to be in outside door-to-door sales. Tried knives, tried a couple of other things, but he ended up feeling like if he was selling vacuums, that it would make him an incredible salesperson. So he decided that he wanted to align his talent with one of the best vacuum companies on the planet. Door-to-door sales, selling vacuums, knocking. And he's out one particular day, fairly new in this space, and he's knocking on doors and he tries to do the introduction. Door gets slammed in his face. Goes to the next door. He knocks as hard as he can. Door gets slammed in his face. Next door, a light knock, change it up a little bit. People don't even open. And he does this for hours, days. with no results. Finally, one day he knocks on the door. An older woman answers such, and she stands in her doorway. And the young man said, please don't slam the door. Please don't shut the door. Just give me a moment. Let me explain to you what it is that these vacuums can do. And I promise you, if you allow me to do a demonstration, if this vacuum doesn't do all of the things that we said it would do, I'll eat the food off of your floor. The older woman in the door said, are you sure? Are you sure about what it is that you are offering? Young man says, I absolutely am sure. Just allow me to show you what it is that our vacuum can do. The young lady, the older lady, she looked around. And then she said to him, young man, you might want to get a fork and a knife because we don't have any power. No power. Making promises, not really understanding the scenario, no power. If 2020 was a recognition, and because some of you are still guilty of being on podcasts, being on panels, writing blog posts, in conversation, some of you are still guilty of recognizing in 2020 that the only reason you or your firm have decided to double down in or do more around diversity and inclusion was because of the death of a Black man. There was nothing more infuriating for me than to listen to people month after month after month say that the only reason they were doing diversity and inclusion was because of the death of George Floyd. 2020 was the recognition. 2023 was the repossession, the recovery, the retraction, the robbery. What we have witnessed all of last year were activists, executives, and politicians doing every single thing that they could to attack businesses that said that we want to do diversity and inclusion a little bit better. We saw many of these activists, these executives, these VCs, these politicians put themselves into a long looping attack of denigration, of derailment, everything that presented them as a full-on assault to the minimal progress that we experienced, the minimal commitment that we've experienced in the last 3.5 years. Like companies have struggled with diversity and inclusion over the last 50 years, 50. And we see just a tad bit of progress. And you have some folks who are upset about how we are shifting our relationship with power. Companies struggling, you got folks inside of organizations feeling fatigue. You got some other folks inside of the organization feeling real fragile. And more often than not, when you have a conversation around diversity and inclusion, it's predictable. Because you all are choosing people that don't have the acumen and the experience to put together the business methodology and the social imperative to have a discussion, create strategy, implement change and difference around diversity and inclusion. Those conversations have been predictable. They've been hindered because they've been punitive. We've stood on stages and we've said that all of this is the fault of white men. Well, damn, that makes it a little bit hard for us to have a conversation that results in dialogue. It's hard when you are constantly being blamed for where we are. Now, I am in no way suggesting that white men do not have culpability in where we are not as it relates to diversity and inclusion. But I can assure you that we all play a role in where we are or are not in terms of progress. We've had inconsistent accountability. I've gone into organizations as a consultant. I've sat down with executives that do not want to hold senior leadership and executive teams accountable. What they'd rather do is put Band-Aids on it. Let's work with mentoring programs. Let's give the entry-level people a bit more support. Let's set up a couple of ERGs. Let's make some donations to some organizations in the community. I want to put a Band-Aid on it, but I'm not really willing to challenge the architecture and the structure inside of my organization. I would rather have plausible deniability. I won't ask. That way, I don't have to deny that I knew. Or I don't have to admit that we haven't done all of the things that we necessarily should be doing in our organization. And as a result of this persistent retraction, our progress is in imminent danger. And what progress am I speaking of? I'm speaking of humanity. See, for me, diversity and inclusion isn't about putting certain numbers of individuals inside of seats. It's changing how we design our organization. Diversity and inclusion for me is not about setting up just a number of ERGs. It is shifting protocol and process inside of the organization. Diversity and inclusion is about having declarative statements from your executive and most senior leader. Diversity and inclusion is about reallocating resources and, of course, making sure that we are holding people accountable. Trust me, if you decide that you are going to remain passive and silent in this journey of humanity, your employee engagement is going to take a hit, your productivity is going to take a hit, and your attrition is going to continue to take a hit. And so what I hope is that in our conversation and in the weeks, months, and years to come, that you will become a catalyst, that you will be one of those individuals that rises in the morning and says that there is something that I can do differently, that I can add a bit more inside of our organization to show that I care about humanity. And for those of you out there who says, well, you know, Torin is a bit Pollyannish and there's no way that we can have empathy and love and all of that in the organization and still be highly effective, I say you are a liar. I want you to become a catalyst. You can operate with empathy, intentionality, love, proximity, and transparency, and be an incredible leader building incredible high-performing organizations and teams and business units and departments. But before you become a catalyst, you need a foundation. First and foremost, we got to feel empowered. You see, I got a lot of individuals that have been silent in the face of injustice. They don't feel like they have any power. As I was preparing for today's session, I went online and I looked at the website for Alongside, and I said, Eve and his team have done an incredible job. But one suggestion that I would give to Eve and his team, the web design team, is that on the home page, you say that people can be superheroes. How about we can be superheroes and superheroines? How many women, how many that identify as being a woman might land on that home page, and just because they see super heroine, decide that they want to learn more about what Alongside and the sister companies are doing. We have to feel empowered, confident enough in who we are, that we can speak up in meetings, we can make suggestions, we can do some things, make some mistakes, and still have the grace from our leadership that we can continue to move forward. Empowerment is foundational. Strategic exploration is foundational. I can't tell you how many recruiters, and I'm a practitioner. I understand recruiting. I also understand leadership and some of the other value points in the organization, but I can't tell you how many recruiters I've spoken with. They'll simply take a requisition from a hiring manager and run with it. They don't ask any questions. They don't do discovery meetings. They don't really qualify what's exactly necessary in this potential candidate. They don't ask any questions. We just take the requisition and run with it. One of the things that we absolutely encourage when we are in a mandate is strategic exploration. You got to know where that hiring manager is in the business, in his team. Are you in continuous improvement? Are you in some sort of transformation? Is your team a mature team and it's really not going to change? Hyper growth? What stage of the business are you in? We got to ask some different questions because from a strategic standpoint, it all depends on the types of questions and conversations, dialogue that we are having. There's a reason why the best of us continue to grow and do the work that we are doing, because we are of value to the business. Empowerment, strategic exploration, and then tactical execution. So I got to know, listen, I'm missing a couple of pieces on the chessboard. I can't necessarily play the way that our strategy is played because I don't have the resources, I don't have the knowledge, I don't have the personnel. There's some pieces that I'm missing, but I am committed to executing. So I'm going to do what I need to do to shift some of the players on the board so that we can play a strong game. But without tactical execution and that observement, that analysis, without that, you are not foundational. So before you can be a catalyst of change in D&I, you must have a foundation: empowerment, being willing to speak up, strategic exploration, knowing where the value points are in the business, what stage of the business they are in, so that it influences the strategy. And then that tactical execution. Once you are foundational, now you are prepared. You're prepared to do number one, which is, for me, and it has always been, to recognize and to record the dimensions of diversity. Now, we do a really, really good job of race and gender. We do an incredible job of asking that, military status in some places. There are some things that are just common. We are going to always ask about them. But there's some other things that we don't even know. We don't capture geospatial markers. We don't really capture familial status. We don't really do that. We don't really capture political leanings, religious status. We don't really record that inside of our business. I'll give you an example of why it's important in a moment. But we don't really ask those questions because we've been conditioned to believe from our leadership and legal that if we don't ask, then it goes back to we can't be held accountable. We can't be perhaps placed in a litigious scenario because we didn't know, we didn't ask, we didn't document that information. I contend and submit to each and every one of you that if you do a better job of recognizing and recording the dimensions of diversity, then you'll be a better leader. Because see, for me, it matters how those dimensions are discussed in terms of building high-performing teams. I always recommend a book by Alex Coban. It's a book titled The Uncounted. Alex Coban asks inside of that book two very poignant questions. Now, the book is bigger than those two questions, but It's these two for me that stood out. The first question is, who are you? That's a big question. But it allows a person to really talk about who they are. You know, that thing that we do when we're doing an interview, we try to be superficial in who are you? I want to know when you are on my team, who are you? Then the second question that Alex asked in the book, and he's very serious about this, is how do you want to be counted? You see, when I'm looking at the dimensions of diversity and I understand these various layers and the nuances of who an individual is, then it helps me as a leader to develop them, to inspire them, to resource and to support them. Let me give you an example. 2017, I'm working with Nike. It's public knowledge that I've worked with Nike for a number of years, not currently, but a number of years. We were going through a scenario where we were creating interview day for one of their candidates, and they had the whole interview team setting up, moving. The recruiting coordinator was scheduling this particular candidate. Candidate was Muslim. Candidate was a devout Muslim. So to the recruiting coordinator's credit, they said, listen, we got to make sure that we are providing some space and that at certain times in the interview, we give them a room where they can put the carpet down and they can pray the way that they like to pray and honor their religion. And then we'll continue on the day. We're going to do everything that we can to support them. Everyone in the room claps. I asked one question. Have we put the hiring managers on alert that the candidate is Muslim? Entire room said no. And I said, why not? Well, we don't want to use any bias in the interview. I said, is there any other reason? They probably gave a few, but the bias piece is the one that stood out. I said, first and foremost, I want to know who's biased in my interviewing chain. So the first thing that you are doing is you are navigating and you are accommodating the candidate, which is what we should be doing, but you are protecting the cancer inside of our system. And I don't mean cancer in a real derogatory way, but I want to know who is the individual that's a hiring manager that might have a bias towards a person, candidate, that's Muslim. That's first thing. Second thing is, what happens when they hire her and she needs to pray? Now, what are we going to do? And the entire room is looking at one another because they hadn't given that any consideration. I want to know the dimensions of who is in my business unit, my department, and my team. Second thing that you can do to be a catalyst is understand and recognize that structure and not systems. Structure and systems are not mutually exclusive to any group. Meaning, men are not the thermometer. That we shouldn't be developing and curating our environments just to accommodate men or primarily to accommodate men. I suggest that we look at our structure and our systems and that we curate them in a way that addresses the least among us. And that when we satisfy the least among us, we will make a difference that everyone can feel. I don't think that as we sit in 2024, that we have done enough to show women that they matter. I recently read a report, I think it was called Operation Foul Anchor. It was about the Coast Guards. I can't remember exactly what year it was from, within the last couple of years. But Operation Foul Anchor from the Coast Guards, it documented the egregious activity of military men and women, and how those individuals not being held accountable, but to the contrary, were being promoted, even though they were abusing women. So this is not just a tech thing. This is not just a manufacturing or a sports thing, not just a corporate thing. Military, promoting men who have been documented to abuse or having abused women and still being promoted. We are sweeping harmful behaviors under the rug, and that absolutely has to stop. But the only way that that will happen is you become a catalyst and you raise your hand and say that in our organization, it is going to be zero tolerance. Number three, you want to be a catalyst? You got to understand that circumstance and condition create your culture, not corporate communications. I'm smiling because that point was born out of a couple of mandates that I've been in where organizations feel like corporate comms is the influence on the culture. That ain't it. It's my circumstance. It's my condition. I bring all of that to the workplace every single day, whether I am physically on site, on premise, or whether I'm on Zoom like I am with you right now. It is everything that I experienced this morning preparing for this 11 a.m. Eastern presentation. Everything that I went through, whether my coffee was right or my vehicle didn't start or children didn't get off to the daycare properly or an aging parent was in the equation and I needed to give them some extra attention. I got a phone call that I lost a loved one. Something is happening inside of my circumstance and my condition, and I am bringing that to the workplace. But a good leader would recognize that. A great leader accommodates that. And we figure out how we can work through that situation so that it doesn't negatively impact our culture, but that we are putting ourselves around individuals to build a fluid culture in our organization. We are recognizing these various dimensions come with different circumstances. These dimensions, these layers, they come with different conditions. That is what builds culture in our organizations. It is so crazy to me that we still have people saying that this is our culture. How is it that we have one culture in an organization? We got a whole bunch of different departments, and I know good and well that the folks over in accounting, they don't operate and move the same way that the folks in sales do, and that they don't operate and move the same way that the legal folks do, and that the folks that are working in the warehouse and on the front line, they have a whole different frequency. They move a little bit differently. We got varied cultures in our organization because that's a result of the various dimensions that people bring to the equation. But if you are not a catalyst, then you can't have and are not having those conversations. I want us to be catalysts. That's what I want. People want to know inside of your organization that the bottom line is the field is level. That if in fact you really are looking at me to evaluate my contribution, my market recon, what it is that I bring in terms of conviction, that if the field is level, that you will absolutely evaluate me on my drive, my performance, my rigor of the role, my command of the role, that you will position me for stretch assignments and for promotion and for the sponsorship that I am so deserving. That you won't continue to do performance evaluations and one-on-one conversations and find yet another reason, just searching for a reason to delay my progress. We got to shift our relationship with power. And when we do that, we build the types of organizations that we are discussing and promoting on our website. We build these incredible places to work, or great places to work, as they say. This is what it takes for us to be who we say that we are. Listen, I've been talking for 30 minutes to get to this point right here. I want principle over technique. because I know that some of you are going to take the words that I delivered to heart, and you are going to do something different in your organization, maybe this afternoon, tomorrow, sometime before the weekend, Monday, but you are going to say, I can do a little more different. I want you to understand, I'm speaking only to you, that it is principle over technique. Why are you doing what it is that you are doing? Knowing that the genuineness, the positive intention, the love of you is doing this because you feel it is going to make a difference. Remember, that is your principle over your technique. That moving from theory to change is challenging, but that it requires your presence. It requires that you show up and you be willing to make some mistakes, do something wrong, say the wrong thing, but know that it's your principle. I can apologize. I can be accountable for what it is that I've done, but it's not going to derail me. My principle says that I want to be a catalyst towards building better, high performing teams, more representative teams, and I'm going to try some things a little bit differently in our organization. We got to understand that data is really always kind of, sort of descriptive. It's not prescriptive, and it typically is topical. And the data that most of you are looking at, I can almost assure you it's topical, because we're not really getting into the stratas, the dimensions that I mentioned a bit earlier. So because it is topical and descriptive and not prescriptive, it requires, once again, human presence. And then the last thing that I absolutely need is for some of us to really look at the survey of the land and say, where can we experience a bit of organizational redesign? Because our current approaches towards diversity and inclusion have really honestly led us to a black box of complacency and theory. Like, we are advocates of highlighting these reports from McKinsey and Boston Consulting Group and Deloitte and all the Catalysts and all of the rest of these people, but it is nothing more than our being complacent and theoretical, that we are not really willing to get in and do the work. And so our current approach has not allowed us to experience the type of progress that so many of us are yearning for. We're not asking for you to give up everything. We are simply saying we can do and be better. I want to say, look, let's look at the variety of the individuals inside of our organization. Let's look at the separation inside of our business units, our departments and teams. Let's look at the disparity that is existing in our place. When I talk about variety, I'm talking about experience and knowledge on the team. When I talk about separation, I'm talking about attitudes and beliefs of the individuals that are on the team. When I talk about disparity, I'm looking at, well, wait a minute, we got some disparity in how people are being compensated or how they're growing in their role. I want to evaluate my data in my organization a little bit differently. That's why some of us are pretty good at doing diversity and inclusion. Some of us are genuine about doing diversity and inclusion. For me, it's about greater humanity over that plausible deniability. It's real simple. I'm at a tipping point. Because I recognize that we are far more nuanced than the duality that is often presented. I know that we are complex individuals and that doing the work of building connected teams is complicated, but that we can do it. I'm really not dismayed by the societal divisions, the growing concern from some of these activists and these politicians and VCs and corporate leaders and titans. I'm not really dismayed by the tone and the tenor of their approach from 2023 into 2024, the passing of legislation. I am not in any way derailed or dismayed by that. I'm not allowing their moral degradation to influence how convicted I am in showing up to help organizations build teams. I got concerns about how we do this, and I am going to make sure that I show up. Because as long as we have children in cages and unethical AI and wayward VCs and extreme ideologues, as long as we have these individuals among us presenting challenge, their voices cannot be ignored. And I'm going to stand and bear witness to what it looks like when you face them and force them to shift that relationship with power. That we can build the type of organizations that we are professing in such prophetic and powerful ways. I just want to tell you that I firmly believe that 2024 can be a pivotal year, but that it will require conversations like this to be absorbed and then actions to be taken. In the words of Elif Shafak, there are no binaries in culture, emotions, and our identities. There are no binaries in culture, emotions, and identities. One should never, ever, ever remain silent for fear of complexity. Never. We should never remain silent for fear of complexity. The wounds of honor are often self-inflicted. Honor is something that each of us is born with. Honor is something that cannot be given. It cannot be taken. It must only not be lost. Serge?
Wow. If the goal, Torin, was to fire us up, I am fired up. Fantastic. And just, I can't even put in words how impactful that conversation is, and your delivery of it is just incredible. Torin, we do have some questions, and I think you're the type of guy that loves pretty in-depth questions and having a real conversation. And I'm going to ask you a difficult question in a way. So you talked about recognizing and recording diversity dimensions. And that can happen when in the hiring process, as you're going through to self-identify what race, what gender, whatever the situation is. How would you respond to, say, a white man that says, I don't want to do that because I feel like I'm going to be discriminated if I don't fit those criterias?
I would respond to that white man the same way, Serge, that I would respond to a Black woman, the same way that I would respond to a person who is Hindu, the same way that I would respond to an individual who has not declared their hidden disability, the same way that I would respond to an individual who appears to be of a certain age. I would say to that white man, then we have not done our job of creating an environment where you feel safe in self-disclosing your information. So that points back towards our leaders and our managers and our supervisors to do a far better job of creating spaces where people feel comfortable. I want to be in an environment, Serge, where I can tell people that I'm a single parent.
Yeah.
I want to be in an environment, Serge, where people, my leaders, know that I don't have a vehicle, that I actually have to catch a public transportation, and that getting to work takes me an hour, hour and a half, whatever the case may be, coming, and then I need to leave a little bit early to grab my child from daycare, and I still need to get back on public transportation. I want to be in an environment where I can reveal those dimensions of who I am, because it goes back to what I said earlier. The more I know about my people, the better I am at developing them and resourcing them and inspiring them and supporting them. And so to that white man, you are in an environment where they haven't created a safe space.
What would be your advice for that company that's looking to hire and they're putting this out front? How, because they don't have a relationship with that particular candidate that's coming in. what messaging or what do they need to have either in their career sites or in their job ads that displays this?
Yeah, so we're talking about two different things. And so forgive me, all of you who are listening, if you took that as me saying we need to capture all of this information in the front. First and foremost, Serge, there are three personas. There's the prospect, there's the
Yep.
applicant, there's the candidate. So to the prospect who is simply looking at our website to learn more about our organization, awesome. We should be doing a type of messaging that reveals to them who we are and what it's like to be inside of our environment. And we can do that a variety of ways through video, through various modalities. We can do that in terms of that messaging. Once we become an applicant, then our messaging and our interaction and engagement with that person or that individual, it begins to change. Become a candidate, it changes yet again. And then once we are hired is when I suggest that we are capturing these various dimensions. So for clarity of those individuals who are watching or will watch the replay, I am not suggesting that we ask for all of this revealing information in the beginning, but that once a person is onboarded in our organization for a period of 6 to 12 months, that we should be slowly capturing information from them in a way that says, we just want to learn to know more of who you are so that we can get you in an organization where you are engaged, productive, and supported.
Mm, really good advice. So if an organization, I'm a big believer in showing true what the reality of within a company it is. And you'll see a lot of employer brand messaging, a lot of career sites that will show diversity in their pictures, right? They'll show diversity in their outbound marketing when it comes to job candidates, but it's not always the reality. So, what's your advice for those companies that are looking to showcase diversity, equity, inclusion, but it might not be the situation right now? And might not be based on bias. It might not be based on anything. It might just be based on the demographic of the area where they're in, which say there is not a lot of diversity, as an example. So, going back to that, like, how real should companies be when they're advertising their diversity, equity, and inclusion?
So I'm going to preface it by saying, I often say if you are committed to doing DNI or DEIB or DEIBJA or whichever acronym you are using, if you are a committed organization, individual, then you are going to ebb and flow through four words: empathy, intentionality, proximity, and transparency. In this example right here, we are focused on transparency. If an organization is working to recruit and to build teams and there's no representation or lacking representation in a particular geography, in a particular community, maybe in a particular discipline. I mentioned an organization earlier in the presentation, and there was one business unit in that organization where there were 50 people in the world, and I may be a little bit off of my number,
Yeah.
but there were less than 100 people in the entire world that could work in this particular department. It's going to be a little challenging to immediately change our representation numbers when you have such a limited, finite pool of talent. So it depends on where we are in terms of this messaging. But to your point, Serge, transparency is the winner.
Yeah.
You tell individuals, whether it be internally or externally, depending on how you are socializing this reality, we are trying. Here are some of the things that we have attempted to do. But it also requires that an organization be willing to bring some different voices into the room. You bring a person like myself in the room, we are strategizing on, well, how do we change this? It may be the way that it is right now, but what's our strategy over the next 12, 18, 24 months to change the way that that works? Talked about it earlier: empowerment, strategic exploration, and tactical execution. So this is where we are. This is where we'd like to be. Let's begin to work our way backwards. Does it mean that we need to set up some recruiting programs, different relationships with colleges and universities? Do we need to start concentrating our marketing in a particular geography, particular zip code? Do we need to establish some relocation bonuses, some relocation packages, something that we haven't offered before? Do we need to have a really big employee referral? I don't know what it is, but there's something. everything has a solution.
Agreed. You started the presentation with talking about obviously the George Floyd incident, then going back to where we are this year, looking back at 2023. And I think we can all agree in certain sectors of the world, diversity, equity, inclusion has been attacked, especially within organization. And the one thing that a lot of business leaders, a lot of people that you were mentioning, they leverage that, hey, there's no correlation of diversity, equity, inclusion efforts and business results. We both know that's not true, but I want to get your point of view and how you would counteract that within your business.
This is one of those challenges that I really struggle with, because for a person who's saying what you just said, and not you, but what you are
Yeah.
parroting, that there is no correlation, then why is it that McKinsey keeps putting out a report that says diverse organizations are more productive? Why is it that organizations like Deloitte and Catalyst and Boston Consulting Group keep echoing the same thing? Why is it that I can get on my computer and I can do academic research going back for 50 years to show that implementing diversity and inclusion in an organization is good? I can also get on my computer and find academic research that says when we add diversity to organizations, it can be a bit of a challenge. And there's some things that we need to do to make sure that we avoid those challenges. It can be disruptive to a system when you are bringing different culture, those circumstances and conditions together, that it's not always a very smooth integration. I'm willing to be a person who's fair in the conversation. I don't really spend a whole lot of time, Serge, with individuals that are disingenuous and that are not willing to have dialogue. They are more apropos to having debate with me or with others, and they're not willing to have dialogue. I'm not really interested in having conversations with those individuals, because more often than not, I'm not going to change their mind. I'm not going to change their mind. But what I will tell you, Serge, and this is the truth, this is the absolute truth. I am building a piece of technology that will capture the business intelligence centered around diversity and inclusion to be able to show an organization that being more diverse is or is not impacting your bottom line. And if it is, awesome, we need to do more of that. If it is not, then what are the things that we need to change to make it better? I am going to eat, as they say, my own food.
Mm. So true. And I think you nailed it, as far as there is a ton of research out there that showcases exactly what you were saying. There is a direct correlation on business results. And if we're not looking at those, we're not furthering the conversation, and we're not being catalysts, right? We're just taking the information and not pushing back. And you talked about not pushing back. Pushing back is the wrong word, but when we're working with our hiring managers and we got to push that limit, we got to go deeper to get the real insight of what that role is. I do believe in intake with your hiring manager as a recruiter, talking from the recruiter perspective, is the most critical, because it's the chance to ask those hard questions. So I want to jump into pay transparency, because it's one that's come up quite a bit, Torin. It's been a big topic of conversation here in Canada, and I know it's been in the US. There's been states in the US that have legislated it, and there has been province, including in our local market here in Atlantic Canada with Prince Edward Islands and parts of Labrador and Newfoundland and Labrador. But what's your overall take here, as far as how do you feel about pay transparency, and is it going to move the needle when it comes to pay transparency, especially between men and women?
I'm going to ask a different question. I
Yes,
know it's
please.
sometimes unfair to respond to a question with a question, but I'm going to flip it.
Yeah.
Serge, I don't know. Think about your last time in corporate America. Um, and think about the time before that and the time before that, Serge. Think about the last 20 years of your professional career. If you were waking up every single morning and knowing that there were individuals in the office, and I'm going to be I'm going to stretch this a little bit.
Okay.
It may not come across the right way, but I say it in love. Last 20 years, you know that for the same work that you are doing, there is a woman sitting next to you that is making 2, 3 times the amount of money that you are making. Let me put it in a different way. Serge, we are in the month of February. That woman sitting next to you for the last 20 years, she made a certain amount of money in December 31st of last year. And that in order for you to catch up with her, you have to work until 2 weeks from now in March, if you are a white man, to make the money that she made in December. And that if you are a black man, that you have to work until August to catch the money that she made in December. And that if you are Hispanic, Latina, a Latin man, that you have to work until September to make the money that she made in December. How would you feel?
Not great.
Exactly. See, it's not so much so do I think that it would work. I absolutely believe that pay transparency is one of the levers that we are using, that it prevents us from having that shift in power. That shift in power. So if I don't talk about how much money I'm making and I can continue to have disparity, women who are single mothers, who don't operate and earn the same as their male counterparts, so now they can't contribute to their 401ks and their retirement funds the way that they need to. For women that may be taking care of aging parents and they have to do it off of a portion of the money that their peers are making. I could go on and on and on. I'm going to tell you, Serge, I get passionate about it because there's not many people who can really argue with me genuinely. You can do a disingenuous argument. You can take a stupid position and stand on it. But if you are a real business person, you really care about business and bottom line and family and community, then we really don't have an argument. You pay people accordingly, and we pay people equally for doing the same work. And I believe that it will make a difference.
Well, I think we've seen a difference in the last couple of years. We're seeing a high level of adoption across Canada and the US and Europe as well, but we still have a lot of work to do. And I think you just put that exactly in perspective of all of us sitting here. How would we feel? And I can tell you, thinking it and putting myself in that seat doesn't feel good at all. And it's also a talent attraction strategy, right? Like you want to know if this is the right fit for you when you're looking at an organization, and not knowing the salary is a challenging. It's definitely, we have the data internally that shows salary transparency on our job postings. There is a massive difference without salary transparency. I'm going to close it on this last question. I know right now the hottest topic in talent acquisition and HR, basically almost in the world of work, is AI. What's your thoughts around AI and how it could potentially improve what we're doing with diversity, equity, and inclusion? Or is there no correlation there?
Oh, no, there's absolute correlation. Listen, the train has already left the station. So, we're not, this journey is not one that we can afford to not be on. And so if you can't get on it at the next stop, you better find a stop where you can get on. The challenge that I will continue to have is that we need to think about the individuals that are in the room. Here I am saying to you that I am going to build a piece of HR technology in 2024. To me, I say, who is going to be in the room helping me build the ideas that I have in terms of a solution? And I'm not suggesting to anyone that I'm going to be 100% perfect or right, because I will not. I can't. I can't solve for all of the various, contributions, creative thoughts, layers. I can't solve for all of that, but I can be very intentional about making sure that we are prodding audiences and communities in different geographies to help contribute to what that solution looks like. And so that's the same thing that I would ask of all of the rest of these HR tech and other solutions that are promoting their position around AI, or the centrality of AI in their solution. And this is what it's going to do. If you are not bringing voices in the room, or helping, having engineers and programmers and developers and other creatives help you develop that solution, then you are probably a bit more on the wrong side of where I'd like to see you in the AI solution. Listen, the bottom line is it is going to absolutely have an impact on how organizations do all aspects of business, to include diversity and inclusion.
My man, Torin, this is one of the most impressive webinars that I've ever been part of. So I want to thank you. And for the audience, before we actually started recording this, I was having a conversation with Torin. And one of the things that, by his generosity, has offered, if any of you want to have deeper conversations about this within your organization, challenges that you're feeling, I want to get a group together. So I want you to reach out to me directly, Serge at careerbeacon.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Reach out to me. I want to organize this session because I think there's a ton of value. And to your point, this conversation is only starting, Torin. I think there is so much more we can do to help this. So, on that note, Torin, if anyone wants to find out more about you or to reach out to you, what is the easiest way?
TorinEllis.com, TorinEllis.com, or across social at Torin Ellis. Simple.
Torin, can't thank you enough. Audience, I really appreciate you taking the time. As I said at the start, we will be rebroadcasting this. We will be sending it out as well. It's worth well listen. And what I want you to do this with this information that you've had today is to start asking those questions and being that catalyst. I also want you to share this with members of your team, members of your organization. This particular talk is so important and we need to continue it. So, Torin, everyone, thank you so much. Please do go check out careerbeacon.com. And my name is Serge Boudreau. If you want to get a hold of me, please reach out to me on all socials or you have my email address. On that note, thank you, everyone.